Good afternoon. Can you hear me in the back? Is it loud enough? Okay. I want you to hear me. I'll start mumbling. If I start mumbling, wave your hands so I'll speak up. My name is Harvey Pratt. I'm a native Oklahoman. I'm a Native American. I work for the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. I've been with them since 1972 as an investigator and as a police forensic artist. I've done police art all over America, probably in about 45 states. Done some stuff out of country for law enforcement and for abducted American citizens. And what I want to talk to you a little bit about today before we get into our main topic is what is a forensic artist? I think, and I've found since I've been doing this with David Lottis and the North American Bigfoot search that a lot of people don't understand what a forensic artist is. So I'm going to show you some samples of forensic art and some of the things that we do. Now some of it is kind of graphic. So I normally don't show this before children. So if you have your child in here, and I would prefer that you not let them see this, because I'm going to show you before and after. I'm going to show you how we find somebody and then how we repair them to make them look alive so that we can identify them. I'm also going to give you a real short sketch of how we reconstruct human skulls. And I think that that's extremely important for us to understand the anatomy, the cranial structure of bipeds or the human beings that walk the ground. So I'll show you some samples of that, and then I'll show you some samples of drawings that I've made across the country in the last 3 years. And then we'll have a little opportunity to answer some questions and make some statements to you about what I'm trying to tell you today. I have a website. It's harveypratt.com, harveypratt.com, and it shows you some Native American art. It shows you some criteria of what I'm doing and where I'm going to be and where I'm going to be talking about various forensic art and about Bigfoot. So you kind of keep track of me, and if I'm going to be in your area, that you could possibly come by and visit with me and see what I'm doing and what's going on. So let me just kind of get into some of the forensics, because a lot of people think that a forensic artist is like most artists that draw pictures of people or landscapes. And what a forensic artist does is records what somebody else saw, not what I see, not how I interpret it. It's what somebody else sees. And I have to testify in court quite often, and I can't testify, I can't change things. So my drawings are done with one setting. They're not done over a period of time. They're done at one setting, and then when the witness is through, I'm through. And I don't change anything. I don't change anything, even though I could make it better, make it look a little better, or want to change something. I don't do that, because I have to make a presentation in court. So my drawings are stopped when the witness is through. My drawings take about an hour and a half. So let me show you an example of some of the things that I've done. This is an FBI top 10. He's wanted by the FBI for killing a police officer. And I did an age progression. What you're looking at is the original photographs on your left, here and here. And you can't hardly see the profile. So as a forensic artist, I took the shadows out and I aged him 8 years. So that's an age progression. And then they wanted to, if he tried to alter his appearance, I put a beard on him. So I did a whole series of drawings and put different types of beards on him. And he was still a fugitive, still FBI top 10. So when he aged, a few years later, they wanted to know what he looked like again, so I aged him again. Made him look a little bit older, made him look bald-headed. There's a lot of things that we go in to determine those kind of things. And we just don't have time for me to teach you a 4-hour class about this kind of stuff. So, but you can see the characteristics. I put a beard on him, a mustache on him. I changed his hair, I put glasses on him, and we disseminated those for identification. This is another drawing. This is called a witness description drawing. This is based on what someone told me. And what I did was I made this drawing based on a witness's description. This is the man that we charged with abducting and killing the 2 girls from the Oklahoma State Fair. And witnesses said this is what he looked like. This photograph was taken 2 weeks after the state fair, and we arrested him about 6 months later. So you can see that it's not him exactly, but it's in the ballpark. It's close, it gives you an idea, gives the investigators an idea of who we're looking for. Feather in it, here's a long feather here, long feather there, the shape, the glasses. It led us to this guy who admitted that he was with those children. This is a skull reconstruction. This is when we first started doing skull reconstructions on actual human skulls. They never aged the skull. We used to age them on paper, and now we age the skull directly on the human skull because we have learned how to do those things. And this actually was about a 65-year-old, 60-year-old Native American that had a crater-bored skull. Crater-bored skull, the back of his head was kind of flat. So we knew that he came from somewhere up north, as one of the Bloods or the Crees or something like that, and trying to identify him. So we do an age progression and an aging on this guy. This is another human skull. You see the full face and the profile. It's dark. It's been burned. This man fell in a curing plant up in Washington, and he slowly burned to death. And so what this is called is a tracing, because they couldn't chip the skull. We measured the skull, and we measured the tissue depth, and we project the tissue depth. And so we trace the skull, and we project out the soft tissue, and we give you an idea of what he looks like. So we have to identify this man on a skull tracing, where we don't have access to the skull. So this is what we think he looked like, full face and profile. And so we want to be in the ballpark. That'll point us in the right direction. This also is called a witness description drawing of an enforcer. And you can see the witness said, this is what we drew this picture saying this is what he looks like. When he's arrested, this is what he looks like. So you can see once again that it's not him exactly, but it's in the ballpark. Now, let me tell you that I've probably done 8,000 of these. In my 40 years of experience, I've probably done 8,000 or more drawings like this, of witness description drawings. I've done about 50 skull reconstructions, and I've probably done 800 soft tissue reconstructions. That's where people have been damaged and they can't produce it. We can't show that, so I clean them up and make them look alive. So this is a witness description drawing, and you can see that it was close enough that it pointed us in the right direction. Randolph Dial. Some of you know who this guy is? All right. This photograph was taken about 2 weeks before he disappeared from Granite. And he was gone for quite some time. He passed away about a year ago in jail. But we wanted to know what he looked like as he aged. So I did some age progressions on him, altered his hairstyle, made him look a little bit older. Since he was an artist, I gave him a little bit of a little artist look, you know, and changed him, gave him a different beard, a goatee, and fleshed him out a little bit, and changed his hairstyle. And so we did it again, and I put glasses on him, I pushed his hair back, and these drawings are instrumental with the U.S. Marshal's Office in helping to identify him in Texas. So you can see they're not him exactly, but obviously they were enough that someone said it looks like the guy down at the chicken farm. These are age progressions. I'm going to run through these quickly, but this is a way that we study people to see how they age and how they change over periods of time. There are things about you that remain constant at age 20 that doesn't change till age 30, and then at age 30 to 40, another characteristics change. So you have some things that remain constant and some things that change. This young boy was arrested when he was about 13 years old. He was institutionalized, and he was arrested about every 4 years for the rest of his life. So I had a series of photographs of him, and I could see how he aged. And there's some things about him that remain constant. He had a flat spot right here on his ear, and he had a flat spot right there in his ear. Ears are good identifiers. They're not positive identifiers, but the cartilage remains the same. Cartilage remains the same, it just elongates. So we're going to watch this boy as he gets a little older and changes. You're going to see some things about his eyebrows, his nose, his mouth, the plumpness, no wrinkles. Looks like he had to be playing football for somebody. See? So you'll see that he's got some skin damage. There's some fair hair, his fair skin. Now you start to notice that his hair's starting to recede. His hair's starting to get pushed back. See, you'll notice that he's starting to get a little wrinkle on his forehead and around his mouth. And you'll also notice that he still has his skin damage across his nose. And if you look closely right there under his left eye, you're going to see a mole. And this mole is going to grow. So that's another thing that we look for, moles and scars. So you see a little better there. And then you really start to see it there. So we look for those kind of things when we're searching for fugitives. We look for those kind of things that are going to manifest themselves 10 years later, 5 years later, 20 years later. You start to get bald. See that flat spot right there? It's still there. So you start to see little railroad tracks between his eyes start to develop. Now, interesting thing about this guy, you look at his eyes. You see in an earlier photograph, you see that his eyes are kind of squinted. And then you see in the later photograph, his eyes are bright, wide open. And what I think happened is that while he's in prison, the doctor had his eyelids lifted. Because the older we get, our eyes sag and you lose your upper vision because your eyelids fold down over your eyes. So we know that that surgery is being done and has been done even at that time, that they probably cut that saggy skin off of his eyelid, which brightened his eye. But you see that mole, he's starting to lose his hair, starting to lose his teeth, you see the folds around his mouth. So you start to see some things that happen to this guy. And I've looked at thousands of these photographs, whether they be white, black, Native American, or Asian, or mixes. You see how those kind of people, what happens to them, how they age. And we do that determination not only by looking at the race and the sex, but we look at the genetic family. So we look at his parents when they were 60, we look at his brothers when they were 60, his children, so we get an idea how that family develops. So you see that little flat spot from 51 to 75, and there's a little flat spot there. It's still there, never did change. Ear cartilage remains pretty constant. This is a psychic drawing. This is a BTK killer. Some of you are familiar with criminal cases. The BTK killer out of Kansas killed quite a few people. I worked that case in the 80s. I also worked this case with a psychic from England. And he helped the European police and the English police to solve a lot of cases. He came over here and we did this drawing based on what he saw after going through a lot of crime scenes. And he made this drawing of this guy. Now it's not real clear because we're on this film and the screen here, but if you look at his hair. Now this was taken in the 70s when he got active. And so this was what the psychic said, we're going to go back to the time people were being killed, and I'll tell you what he looked like at that time. So you look at the hairdo, the eyes, the nose, the jawline, the mouth. I think this guy did a phenomenal job. He was very accurate. We also look at, I've dealt with a lot of psychics in criminal cases. Some good, some bad. You just have to kind of be careful about what you say, what you feed them. And some of them are extraordinary. I want to know what he looked like without a beard. So we want to know what he looked like. No one had done it. No one had made any offer to take anything off. So I took his beard off and I sent it to the military and to the FBI and the CIA and to get an idea, because this guy's got a lot of money. If he wanted to, he could make himself taller. He could stretch his bones. He could take sections out. He could do a lot of things with money. He could do plastic surgery. So if he decided he got desperate enough to shave his beard off, I wanted our people to know what he looked like. This is an old case. Unsolved homicide. This is the victim. This is a skull reconstruction. This is a victim. This is a full face. That's the killer down there. What the killer did was, when he killed this guy, he took the wallet off of him. He put it in his pocket. He took his wallet, put it on this guy, and he burned the body up. So 25 years later, they're still looking for this guy. and the investigator, the sheriff up there said, can you do a skull reconstruction for me? So you look at the skull reconstruction and helped us identify this guy after 25 years. We ran the records check and found the killer in California after 25 years. And they went and got him. So you see the skull reconstruction, once again, you see it's not him exactly, but it's very close. You know, so, and that's where we want to be. We want it to point us in a certain direction. Skull reconstructions, and this girl was killed up around Humboldt County. She stumbled into a marijuana grower's patch. They killed her. They dismembered her and used her for fertilizer. When the narcotics guys came and started pulling up the stalks, they pulled up her bones and sent her to me to be reconstructed. This is one of the Green River victims. You know, there's 49 women that were killed. There was 56 women that we know of that were killed in the Green River killer, and we found 49 bodies. This was one of them. He killed. Didn't make too many difference what race they were. Most of these little girls were either runaways, involved in narcotics, or they were involved in prostitution. And they were easy targets. They were very transient. They moved around a lot, so nobody missed them when they disappeared. So this was one of them. You'll notice that I did not do this skull reconstruction here. This was done out of Louisiana. Somebody else did it. And then they took a really poor quality photograph for dissemination. And so what I did, these are the same photographs. This is the same photograph. I did a photo retouch of that original photograph and turned it into this so that we could get him identified. So it just made him look alive, that we could publish it so that somebody might recognize him, and they did. This is an age progression of a 6-year-old abducted out of California. 10 years later in Texas, National Missing Children Center said, we want to know what he looks like. Can you age him 10 years? So I do an age progression based on his brothers, based on his parents, and based on cranial growth of a young child. And we came up with this drawing. And a school teacher saw the drawing and thought it looked like one of her students and made an inquiry, and it turned out to be that student. So we recovered this boy after 10 years. Very lucky. These kids normally don't survive that kind by pedophiles. They're normally destroyed. This boy was kept by the same guy for 10 years. This little boy was abducted out of Florida by his stepfather. Got mad at the mother. They got in a big argument. He stole her boy to punish her, and he took him to Canada. 9 years later, we did an age progression on him, and we found him in Canada and brought him back to Florida by a private investigator. So, and I'm just going through some of these things just so you'll understand what a forensic artist does when we talk about interviews, and the interview techniques that we use to develop and to restore memory and recall and how to organize people. So there's a whole system of things that we do in order to develop drawings from witnesses. This is a grandmother when she's about 22. This is a daughter at about 22. And you look at the similarities between the mother and the daughter. Look at the long jaw, the chin, the nose, the cheek brown, the eyebrows, how they kind of droop in the corners. If we were to push her hair back, her hair would look pretty similar to that. So you see a lot of characteristics that are very close to one another. So now you see the daughter and the granddaughter. This is the husband. So you're looking at the granddaughter, and you see some of the very same characteristics. See her eyes kind of droop down in the corners. She has a long nose, she has a long chin, but she kind of got her daddy's square jaw. So you see some characteristics, but we want to know what she's going to look like when she's about 22 years old. So that's how I project her to look. She's about 10. She's about 10 now. So we got a few more years to wait to see how close we are on an age progression. This is a guy we chased in Oklahoma. We chased him. It actually wasn't a long period of time, but he was living out in the woods and he was living pretty hard for about 30, 60 days. And so we wanted to make him look tired and give our investigators and the troopers and all law enforcement an idea of what they might run into when they see this guy after being on the street and living in the woods for. So I made him look tired. And when he was caught, he was shot by a doctor, and he looked pretty much like these. So we're pretty lucky that he didn't do anybody else. It's just another sample of a witness description drawing to see how similar we can get. And you'll see that they're not just real refined drawings, they're sketches. They're sketches. I do portraits, but portraits take a long time. We don't have that kind of time with victims and witnesses. So we do sketches, and hopefully we're going to get in the ballpark where someone will recognize it. I'm going to reconstruct the skull for you real quickly. There's a lot of characteristics that we look for, male, female, the different races. All of those things come into play when you look at a human skull. We can tell all those things. By examining bones, we can tell how many, if a woman's had children, we can tell you how many children she had. We can tell you how tall they were and how much they might have weighed. You know, we can't tell what color your eyes were or the color of your hair from the bones, but we can tell an awful lot. We can tell you if you've had illnesses, if you've been sick, if we can, you know, then we can do a DNA genetic background on you. So you see this is a skull of a white male. He's about 25, maybe 6 foot tall, 180 pounds. And you see the cranial vault. Back here, most men have a bump on the back of their head called the occipital protuberance. And that's a main characteristic. A woman can have that. It's just a matter that the characteristics can flow back and forth. It just depends on how many characteristics we have by looking at the human skull. The positive proof is in the pelvis, but a male has a sloping forehead, a big brain vault, occipital, a large mastoid bone, which is the bone behind the ear. The angle on his jaw is almost perpendicular, straight up and down, and the mandible has a little flat spot on it right here. We call it a flat spot, but it can have a little wiggle, a little dimple in it, but we just refer to it as a flat spot. Most women do not. Women have a bulging forehead, no occipital, a smaller mastoid. This angle is about 25 degrees. They have a rounded chin, and they do not have a very pronounced brow. When the lights come on, take a look at some of these men and see these big old brows on them. Women don't normally have that, but most men have that big brow. So we glue everything together. There's about 22 bones in the human skull, not counting the teeth. And so we put cotton in all these openings. And then we put a little thin layer of clay over there, and I use plastic mannequin eyes. And we set them into the eye orbits. You see this little bone here in the nose? That's called the spine, the nasal spine. That tells us how long your nose is. So it's an important characteristic for us. It tells us how long your nose is. And then we place tissue markers on the skull. 1 through 10 divides the skull, and after that, everything 11 and 12 is left and right. Till we mark it all over because we know about how much he weighs. So we normally do thin, normal, and heavy. So now you get an idea how much tissue is on this guy. That's a normal weighted guy. You can see how thick the skin is on him, and on his around his face, and on his chin. The zygomatic bridge here is that bridge across from your eye down to here. It's like a little bridge. You can stick your fingers all the way through it. Are you guys comfortable with him being?
Oh, yeah.
I'm good. Well, okay. So you see the skull, and then we start building clay. And I've cut this short. I really cut this short, so we'll have some time. There's a lot of other people here that need to be talking. Nasal spine, the lips, the corners of the mouth are in the incisors, and the fullness of the lip is based on measuring the teeth from upper gum line to bottom gum line. So we have a system of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So you get a little better look as we start to come through the reconstruction. So now we know we find that spine and 3 times the length of that. And if that spine is straight out like that, or down, or up, then that tells us the angle of the nose. So those are some of the things that we use. And we want to open up the mouth so you can see teeth. You can see the teeth. Teeth are great identifiers. You know, so we open up the mouth and display the teeth. If that were me, my family would know that I have an overlapping front tooth and that I have a dental flaw in one of my incisors. And they would see that, and that would help them make the identification because that may not be exactly right. So we put a shirt on him, we put the hair on him, and we put a smile on him, and we photographed him. Full face, right and left profile, with his mouth closed. All right, soft tissue reconstructions. These are soft tissue reconstructions. And I'm going to tell you right up front, they are going to blur these out. They're going to blur these out because I don't want the family of some of these victims to see this. Okay? We use these for investigative purposes. I use them for you to understand what we're doing and how we're doing it. These are gunshot wounds. That's an entry wound, an exit wound, and another entry wound from behind the head. And there's 2 bullet holes came out through here. It's a gang killing out of California. And so these are the same photographs. Same photographs. I just repair them. And you notice that I left his mouth because I want you to see the teeth as an identifier. So I left his teeth. These are the same photographs. These are the same photographs. I repaired, took all of this out, and painted her, and we identified her. She was killed by the I-5 killer, killed 50 women in California along Highway 5, killed 50 women. This is one of the last ones he took her. She was taken out of Seattle. We found her at Lake Tahoe 4 days later. And I reconstructed her for the California Department of Public Safety. So there's a reconstruction, and there's what she looked like. The investigator in Oregon said, I think I know who that girl is. He pulled up those photographs, and we did an investigation, got her identified. Motorcycle accident, made a mistake. She got on a motorcycle with a drunk. And she hit it, and he passed a car at night, and he hit a bus head on. So she was pretty damaged, and we did a reconstruction on her, cleaned her up, made her look alive, and got her identified. She's out of Texas. So that's the soft tissue reconstructions. Another soft tissue reconstruction, one of the first ones I ever did, you notice she's laying on her side with her mouth open. We kind of closed the mouth a little bit. We cleaned the body off. We changed our whole style of photography. That's lime on her. They poured lime on her to increase the decomposition. These are autopsy cuts. This is another killing in Oklahoma several years ago. And they shot him with a shotgun, and you see the hands that are pulling his face into shape, because if you remove the hands and let go of his skin, he looked like a paper sack that somebody stepped in. So we're pulling him up to get him identified, and we got him identified. He was out of Florida. Another guy out of Oklahoma, one of the first ones I ever did, he was shot 5 times with a 12-gauge shotgun. He had 7 pair of socks on. He was hitchhiking down the road, and somebody killed him in western Oklahoma. And we've never identified this guy. These are animal bites. This girl was killed. We found her at 7 o'clock in the morning. We did the whole crime scene, photography, processed the film, did the retouch, put her on the 11:30 news that morning, and had her identified at 10 to 12, and the killer in jail at 5 o'clock. And that's the photo retouch. It sped up the whole investigation, expedited the investigation, saved a lot of money and a lot of wear on the families and the investigators. So you see same photographs, a water victim. Interesting thing about this case, that we have a software program called facial recognition, and it's never been used with a composite. We ran a composite through there, and it kicked this girl out. And we had, at the time, we had 40,000 photographs in that database. And we found her in there, kicked out 10 people, but it kicked her out of 40,000. So now that software program has been readapted, rechanged, and where it will accept composite drawings more readily. So we're using that on sex offender files, and we're able to put sex offenders into the database and then run composite drawings. These are just another example of retouching and cleaning somebody up to get them identified. This girl was from Ohio. This guy was a fugitive, killed a couple of people. We were chasing him door to door, and all we knew was this is what he looked like, and he shaved all that off, and he had already killed 2 and shot at 2 more, and we were sending our fugitive teams into this area looking for him, and they thought they were looking for a guy with a beard, and he already said, I'm going to kill the first police officer that approached me. So we were able to get this guy arrested because of the retouch. Water victims, you can see, same girl, just clean her up, open up her eyes, and publish that sort of stuff. You know, it just makes it a lot easier for the investigators, a lot easier for the family. You know, we don't want to put something like that in the paper and have the family see that. We'd rather see them see this than opposed to them, the damaged body. So we use that a lot. These are all water victims. She's out of Tahlequah's old case. We've never identified her. I'm going to get into some composites of some of the sightings of Bigfoot. This isn't from. How many of you are familiar with the term American Indian ledger art? Let me see a sign of hands. Ledger art. There's just a few of you. Ledger art. Let me explain what ledger art is. As the Europeans came across America, they carried ledger books with them in their wagon trains. And these ledger books had a list of people and supplies. And prior to ledgers, the Indians would capture these ledger books. They would be blank. And rather than drawing on hides and on stones and things like that, like they did before, when they discovered these books, they and pencils and colored pencils and ink, they started drawing in these ledger books. Very detailed drawings about exploits. This drawing was done in around the late 1870s, maybe the early 80s, by a man called Silverhorn. And what you're going to, and you look, this was done in 130 years ago. 130 years ago. In a ledger book. What you're seeing is their rendition of a Bigfoot. See, he's in a furred coat, he's furred around the head. You'll notice that he's got a tree growing out of him. He's got a tree growing out of him. Ledger art, when they were to identify somebody, they would say his name was Big Bird. Above that drawing that he did of himself, he would draw a big bird or a running buffalo or whatever his name might be. They would depict that as that's this person. Well, that's basically what that is. That's telling them who this person is, telling the people who this guy is. What's interesting is he's got an Indian in a sack on his back. An abduction. He's got somebody that he kept. Carried him around. So that is depicting an abduction of somebody in the 1880s. What this reflects is, according to tribal information, is that this guy came from the mountains. He came from the mountains, and they say that he followed them from the mountains because the Kiowa tribe actually came from up north down into Oklahoma. Oklahoma wasn't their original grounds. They came here on their own. But they came from the mountains, and they said that this man followed down here. So I think that's as my first slide. I think that's very interesting about something that documents something that's over 100 years ago. This is a drawing that I did a little over a year ago in California of a female that was witnessed by a firefighter. Watch this, and he described this girl. Now that's why I went into everything about forensic art, about drawing, to show some credibility that I don't make this, I don't fantasize this up, I draw what someone tells me. And you'll see this long hair, and her face is almost void of a lot of hair. She thought that this woman was pregnant, or she might have been holding on to something. And she was eating berries, eating leaves. You notice it looks like she's got a grin on her face. And what we think she was doing was eating these leaves, and she was dragging them through her mouth. And when it come out this way, it would kind of pull her mouth a little bit. Now this was not real close. It was a little ways away. So it appeared that she was grinning, but she was stripping these branches through her mouth. leaves. Another young man up in Northern California, this was the first one I ever drew. This drawing was the very first. I had no idea what I was going to be drawing. The only thing I ever saw was the Patterson Gilman photographs, and that was the only impression I ever had other than stories I had heard. And when I did this drawing with this young man that came off the hill, that he saw this guy stand up as he came off a ridge and around the ridge, and this guy was squatted down, and within a lot of the drawings I made that they were squatting or bending over, and then they stand up. He said this guy's about 10 foot tall. He said he stood up, and he said I spoke to him in Native American, in his language, Hoopa language, and he said, and I started around him. I'm carrying a gun. He said he just stood there and watched me with these eyes, and I went around him like this, and when I got right even with him, I took off running. He said I ran down the hill. He said as fast as I could. He said I looked back over my shoulder, and he's going like this to me, pointing. And I said, what do you think he was telling? Maybe some other people that were with him was telling him that you're going. He said, I think he was telling me, get my ass off the hill. But that was the first one I did. He had a lot of gray hair, long gray hair. So I was really kind of surprised and shocked at that. A woman and her niece were staying in a cabin, and this guy stuck his head in a window. The window from outside up was almost 9 foot tall, and he stuck his head in the window, and she spoke to him, and the little girl looked up, and she saw his green teeth. She drew a picture very similar to this. Saw his green teeth. This guy was bald-headed. She said, he was starting to get real bald. And he looked in the window, and she spoke to him, and he huffed her. He went, whoa, whoa, and he turned around and walked away. So that was another example of what someone told me. This guy crossed the road in front of a man that was a manager of a big grocery store in Northern California. And he had told his family that he had just recently moved up there and was making fun of the people about Bigfoot, was making fun of them, and this guy ran in front of him. And he called his family and said, I just saw one. He said, I couldn't hardly talk. But he talked about how thick and big barrel chested these guys were up there. He said it's just massive strength. He said it's just all nothing but pure strength and energy as he just moved across the road. This guy was stealing trash out of a big trash can. Their trash cans are twice the size of this table here. And he was stealing trash cans out of this lady. And I've found something very strange about those people in Northern California. There's a lot of bears up there, and they hear a noise. They go outside to see the bears, and they walk right out there by them, you know. And she stepped off her porch and looked down there, and this guy is backing out of that little shed, and he turns and looks at her, and she looks at him like that, and then he turns and walks away from her. And he's carrying 2 trash bags in his hands. And so she sees his back. And the interesting thing about the back, she said, was this hair was like a cape. It grew all in one piece, not one long strip of hair, but all in like a cape that came down the head, onto the shoulders, and down to the back. And so when he moved, you could see it shimmer and shake, and you can see his muscles, and he would ran into the woods. She picks her phone up and calls the local police, and they're there within a minute. And they have one of them's a canine unit. The dogs won't get out. The dogs will not get out without the canine unit. And the canine officer said he was glad. He said, I'm really glad that they did. So he said, we searched for about 20 minutes, and they'd hear a noise, and then they'd hear a noise, and they'd go a little bit further, and a little bit further, and finally they said, we're not going any further. And someone asked him and said, did you look up in those big trees? That officer said, no, I didn't want to. I did not want to look up there. So the next day they found these yogurt cups where he had taken all these old yogurts and he had bit into them and sucked the yogurt out of these cups. And they found those, they turned them over to a museum up there. They found some hair where his arm got caught in the plywood. This is another one that one of the guys took. As it peeked around a big tree as he was driving by, and they stopped and backed up and looked at it, and it turned and ran down almost a 90-degree slope. He said it was just almost straight down, and as it was running down the hill, it would kind of stop itself with those little trees, those smaller trees that he could grab and almost push them down and go a little bit further and push another down and run on down the hill. And so they see, I understand there are quite a few little trails like that where these things will run down those big steep canyons and break themselves on the trees. And they say that in some of those instances, when they grab those trees, if they don't bend or come loose, that they'll actually twist the tree and break it. So this guy, he said he had to be over 10 foot tall when he peeked around the tree, because they went back and measured the tree where he stuck around, and he had his arms around the tree like this. So he said it's a huge tree. So you see different styles, different types, is what I'm trying to make a point to you here. You see different things. You see a guy that's covered with a lot of hair, some that are not. 82-year-old woman walked right up to this guy. Walked right up to him within fence length. He's on one side, she's on the other, as close as I am to this stand. And she starts visiting with him, speaking in her native language, and she asked him if he's hungry. She runs back inside and gets 2 apples and a loaf of bread, comes back out, and he's gone. Now her light had come on because she heard a bear in her trash can. I'm telling you, why do you go outside and stand when a bear or something is in your trash? They all go out there to do that. And she went out there, and so she ran back down, and she hung that loaf of bread and those 2 apples on her fence, and she went back inside, and pretty soon her light went out, her automatic light went out, and so she starts doing what grandmas do, and then pretty soon the light comes on. She goes back out there and that stuff is gone. So the next day she has her granddaughter go and buy some, Gina, was it cat food or dog food? Dog food. She bought one or the other, I can't remember, a 5-pound bag, and she opened it and hung it on the fence thinking, well, he'll just take a handful. He didn't, he took the whole bag. He took the whole bag, and her neighbor had a box of puppies on her back porch, and well, that's another story. This little girl, this is a little female. This lady that saw this one was watching her children and some neighbor kids play in the front yard, and they start calling for her. Mama. She's still feeling around. Mama. And the third time is, Mama! And so she steps out on the porch, and all these kids are looking at her, and they turn, and they point, and there's this little girl standing there by some big berry bushes eating berries, watching these kids play. When she realizes everybody's watching her, she turns around, and the woman said she walked away with purpose. She walked away with purpose. And the next day, the neighbors lost all of their puppies in a box. They had a bunch of little puppies in a little box, and they disappeared. A week later, they all came back, but they were not alive. They didn't, apparently she didn't know how to take care of them, but she took them to play with and then brought them back after they didn't make it. So it's an interesting story. But that's the shape of a female, a little female. See how slender she is. Said her feet was maybe, they had some cast of her feet. But you see that she's covered with hair. Her face is pretty smooth, slender, but still very powerful looking. And this is a close-up of that little girl, that little one that she saw. This is a close-up photograph a drawing of the face that this woman saw. This is up in Oregon. A young woman has her business, is driving down the road, not a highway, but just a blacktop road, and she's driving fairly slow, just kind of looking around, and this young blonde female came walking down the road, stepped out the timber, walked along the road. She stopped her car This girl walked in front of her and then walked right by the driver's door, and she said that was tall, slender, very frail, didn't look healthy. Said she did not look well. But she said, I watched her for quite some time. And she came out in front of me, down the side, and back up into the trees. And that's how she said how slender she was. So, and I like the colors. So, you know, y'all starting to hear about colors of the Bigfoot and the Sasquatch. So they're blonde, they're white, they're black, they're auburn, different colors. You know, it's a question to my mind, you know, that is that due to age, you know, as they grow, or is that due to the winter, like a deer changes color from summer to winter? You know, is there something like that? You know, there's a lot of things we don't know. I don't know. Maybe you guys know. I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know. I'm fairly new into this, you know, but it's got my attention. You know, I'm interested. This one was seen by a woman as her son was riding a motorcycle down the road and up to her house. And she wouldn't let him get on the highway, but she let him ride her motorcycle around. And she was standing on the porch watching him. And what she saw, all of a sudden, out of the timbers, is her young boy riding a motorcycle. And right behind him is a Bigfoot chasing him. And she said, this is what he looked like. So we drew this drawing first. And she said his hair was just blowing in the wind and he was running. She said he just looked exhilarated. He looked happy and was like he was really having a good time. And when the boy